Westfield High School's biggest bullies thought they'd found their next easy target when quiet new teacher Sarah Martinez walked through the doors. What they didn't know was that the soft-spoken woman grading papers in room 204 had spent the last 8 years training in mixed martial arts, holding a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and competing in underground fighting circuits across 3 states. When their vicious rumors started spreading like wildfire, they had no idea they were about to face someone who could literally crush them and their lies. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Sarah Martinez carried her cardboard box of teaching supplies down the hallway of Westfield High School. It was her first day as the new English teacher, and the maze of lockers and classroom doors felt overwhelming. At 28, she had finally landed her dream job after years of substitute teaching and part-time positions that barely paid the bills. Sarah had moved to Westfield, Colorado from Phoenix specifically for this opportunity. The mountain town was a stark contrast to the desert heat she'd grown up with, and she was looking forward to starting fresh. Her shoulder-length brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a modest gray blazer over dark jeans, professional but approachable. Exactly the image she wanted to project. Room 204 was tucked away in the English wing, a decent-sized classroom with large windows overlooking the school's courtyard. Sarah set her box on the desk and surveyed her new domain. 30 desks arranged in neat rows, a whiteboard that had seen better days, and motivational posters that the previous teacher had left behind. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. As she unpacked her supplies, Sarah could hear the chatter of students in the hallway. Classes wouldn't start for another hour, but teenagers were already gathering, their voices carrying through the thin walls. She had taught high schoolers before, so she knew what to expect: the testing, the attitude, the constant challenge of earning their respect. What Sarah didn't know was that 3 students had already noticed her arrival and were discussing her in hushed tones near the water fountain just outside her classroom. Tyler Morrison was the unofficial leader of Westfield High's most notorious group of troublemakers. At 17, he stood 6 feet tall with broad shoulders from playing football, though he'd been kicked off the team junior year for fighting. His blonde hair was always perfectly styled, and he carried himself with the arrogance of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. Beside him stood Jake Hendricks, Tyler's loyal sidekick since middle school. Jake was shorter and stockier, with dark hair and a permanent smirk that made teachers instantly distrust him. He was the type who would throw the first punch in a fight, but always found a way to avoid getting caught. The third member of their group was Ashley Connors, a 17-year-old with platinum blonde hair and a reputation for spreading gossip faster than wildfire. She was pretty in a way that she used as a weapon, manipulating situations to her advantage and destroying reputations with carefully placed rumors. "Look at her," Ashley whispered, peering through the small window in the classroom door. "She looks like she's about 12 years old. This is going to be so easy." Tyler grinned, already formulating a plan. "New teachers are always the most fun to break. Remember what we did to Mr. Peterson last year?" Jake snickered. "Poor guy lasted 3 weeks before he had a nervous breakdown. I heard he's selling insurance." Now, the trio had made it their mission to drive out any teacher they deemed weak or unworthy of their respect. They'd perfected their tactics over the years, spreading rumors, disrupting classes, turning other students against their targets, and making their victims' lives miserable until they either quit or transferred to another school. Sarah Martinez, with her quiet demeanor and youthful appearance, looked like perfect prey. Inside the classroom, Sarah continued setting up her space, completely unaware of the storm brewing just outside her door. She arranged her desk supplies with military precision, a habit she'd developed during her years of training. Everything had its place, and everything was in its place. On her desk, she placed a small framed photo of herself with her younger sister Emma, taken during Emma's college graduation, the previous spring. Next to it, she set a coffee mug with "World's Okayest Teacher" printed on the side, a gag gift from her roommate back in Phoenix. As she worked, Sarah's mind wandered to the evening routine she'd established in her new apartment. After a full day of teaching, she planned to head straight to Iron Mountain Gym, a small mixed martial arts facility she discovered on the outskirts of town. She'd already spoken with the owner, Marcus Thompson, about continuing her training regimen. Sarah had been practicing martial arts since she was 20, starting with basic self-defense classes after a frightening encounter with a stalker during her college years. What began as a safety measure had evolved into a passion, then an obsession. She'd earned her black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, competed in amateur MMA tournaments, and even won the regional women's lightweight championship 2 years running. That was a part of her life she kept strictly separate from her professional identity. She'd learned the hard way that people made assumptions about female fighters, that they were aggressive, masculine, or looking for trouble. None of which was true in her case, but she'd decided long ago that her colleagues and students didn't need to know about her extracurricular activities. The bell rang, signaling the start of the first period. Sarah took a deep breath and walked to her classroom door, opening it to greet her students. The hallway was bustling with activity as teenagers hurried to their classes, books and backpacks in hand. Her first class was sophomore English, and as students filed into room 204, Sarah tried to read their faces. Some looked curious, others bored, and a few seemed to be sizing her up like predators evaluating prey. "Good morning, everyone," Sarah said as the final student took their seat. "I'm Ms. Martinez, and I'll be your English teacher for the rest of the semester." The class was a typical mix of suburban high school students, some engaged, others clearly wishing they were anywhere else. Sarah launched into her introduction, explaining her background in education and her expectations for the class. "I know it's never easy having a new teacher halfway through the semester," she said, her voice carrying a warmth that immediately put some students at ease. "But I'm here because I love literature, and I want to share that passion with you." The class went smoothly, with Sarah managing to engage even the most reluctant students in a discussion about the novel they were currently reading. She felt a surge of confidence as she watched them respond to her teaching style, which was more interactive and discussion-based than what they seemed accustomed to. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. During the brief break between classes, Sarah stepped into the hallway to stretch her legs. That's when she noticed Tyler Morrison leaning against the lockers across from her classroom, staring directly at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Can I help you?" she asked, approaching him with a friendly smile. Tyler straightened up, his 6-foot frame towering over her 5'6" stature. "Just checking out the new teacher," he said, his tone casual but somehow menacing. "I'm Tyler Morrison. I'll be in your 4th period class." "It's nice to meet you, Tyler," Sarah replied, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the uncomfortable feeling in her stomach. "I look forward to having you in class." Tyler's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, I think you're going to be very interesting, Ms. Martinez. Very interesting indeed." As he walked away, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She'd encountered students like Tyler before, the ones who saw new teachers as challenges to overcome rather than people to learn from. But she'd handled difficult students in the past, and she was confident she could handle whatever Tyler Morrison threw at her. What she didn't realize was that Tyler had already made his decision about her fate at Westfield High School, and he was about to set in motion a campaign that would test every ounce of strength and resilience she possessed. By lunchtime on her first day, Sarah had taught 3 classes and was feeling optimistic about her new position. The students seemed responsive, And she'd managed to get even the most reluctant readers engaged in discussions about character motivation and plot development. She grabbed her brown bag lunch and headed to the faculty lounge, hoping to introduce herself to her new colleagues. The lounge was a cramped space with mismatched furniture and a coffee machine that looked like it belonged in a museum. 3 teachers sat around a small table, deep in conversation about weekend plans. Sarah approached with a smile. "Hi, I'm Sarah Martinez, the new English teacher. Mind if I join you?" The eldest of the group, a woman in her 50s with graying hair, looked up with genuine warmth. "Of course. I'm Linda Webster. I teach math. This is David Chen from the science department and Rachel Foster from social studies." As Sarah settled into a plastic chair, she felt herself relaxing for the first time all day. The teachers were welcoming, sharing stories about their students and offering advice about navigating the school's quirky policies. "So where did you teach before this?" David asked, unwrapping a sandwich. "I was substituting around Phoenix for the past few years," Sarah replied. "This is actually my first permanent position." "Well, you picked a good school," Rachel said. "Most of the kids here are great. Though I should warn you about a few troublemakers in the junior class." Linda nodded knowingly. "Tyler Morrison and his crew. They've made it their personal mission to torment new teachers. Last year they drove poor Mr. Peterson to quit after spreading rumors that he was having an affair with a student." Sarah's stomach dropped. "That's awful. What happened to Peterson?" "Nothing, thankfully, because the rumors were completely fabricated," David explained. "But by the time the truth came out, the damage was done. Peterson couldn't handle the stress and left teaching altogether." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "The administration knows about these kids," Rachel added, "but Tyler's father is on the school board, and Jake's uncle is the mayor. They always seem to slip through the cracks." Sarah absorbed this information while finishing her sandwich. She'd dealt with difficult students before, but the idea of facing systematic harassment, backed by political connections, was daunting. Meanwhile, 3 floors below in the school cafeteria, Tyler Morrison was holding court at his usual table near the windows. The cafeteria buzzed with the energy of 400 teenagers eating lunch. But Tyler's voice carried over the noise as he addressed his growing audience. "So I met our new English teacher today," he announced, stabbing his pizza with a plastic fork. "Ms. Martinez. Looks like she's about 16 years old and probably weighs 90 pounds soaking wet." Ashley Connors leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Please tell me we're going to have some fun with this one." "Oh, we're definitely going to have some fun," Tyler confirmed. "But we need to be smart about it. Can't use the same tactics we used on Peterson." Jake nodded eagerly. "What did you have in mind?" Tyler's smile was predatory. "I'm thinking we start with some social media magic. Ashley, you're in charge of that. Create some fake accounts. Start posting things about our dear Ms. Martinez. Nothing too obvious at first. Just plant some seeds." Ashley was already pulling out her phone. "What kind of seeds? Let's see. Maybe something about her being unqualified? Or better yet, hint that she's got some kind of sketchy past. You know how fast rumors spread in this place." A sophomore named Kevin Rodriguez, who'd been eavesdropping from the next table, spoke up hesitantly. "I had her for the first period today. She seemed really nice, actually. And she knew her stuff." Tyler's expression darkened. "Nobody asked you, Rodriguez. Mind your own business." Kevin quickly looked away, but not before Tyler noticed several other students nodding in agreement with the sophomore's assessment. This irritated Tyler even more. If students actually liked the new teacher, his job would be significantly harder. "We need to move fast," he told his crew, "before she has a chance to win people over." Back in the faculty lounge, Sarah was wrapping up her lunch break when Principal Margaret Sullivan walked in. Sullivan was a tall woman in her early 60s with silver hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd been dealing with teenagers for 3 decades. "Ms. Martinez, how was your first morning?" Sullivan asked, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Really good, actually." The students seemed engaged and eager to learn. Sullivan nodded approvingly. "That's what I like to hear. I should mention we have a faculty meeting after school today. Nothing major, just some policy updates and introductions. Of course I'll be there." As Sullivan turned to leave, she paused. "Oh, and Sarah? If you ever have any issues with students, any issues at all, don't hesitate to come see me immediately. We have a zero-tolerance policy for harassment of faculty members." The warning was clearly meant to be helpful, but it only reinforced Sarah's growing concern about what she might be walking into. Fourth period arrived faster than Sarah had hoped. As students filed into her classroom, she immediately spotted Tyler Morrison. He sauntered in with the confidence of someone who owned the place, taking a seat in the back row and making a show of sizing up the room like a general surveying a battlefield. Jake Hendricks followed close behind, settling into the desk next to Tyler. Sarah noticed how other students unconsciously gave them space, as if they were dangerous animals that might strike without warning. "Good afternoon, everyone," Sarah began, trying to project more confidence than she felt. "Today we're going to continue our discussion of To Kill a Mockingbird and explore the theme of moral courage." She'd chosen the topic deliberately, hoping to engage the students in a meaningful conversation about standing up for what's right. As she began explaining the assignment, she noticed Tyler whispering something to Jake, who snickered in response. "Mr. Morrison," Sarah said calmly, "would you like to share your thoughts with the class?" Tyler looked up with exaggerated innocence. "Just wondering if you've actually read the book, Ms. Martinez. Some of the things you're saying don't match what I remember from when I read it." Sarah felt her cheeks flush but maintained her composure. "I'd be happy to clarify any points that seem unclear. What specifically are you questioning?" "Well, you said Atticus Finch represents moral courage, but isn't he also kind of a failure? I mean, he loses the case, Tom Robinson dies, and nothing really changes. Seems like his courage didn't accomplish much." It was actually a sophisticated literary analysis, and Sarah found herself impressed despite the obvious challenge in Tyler's tone. "That's an excellent point, Tyler. The relationship between intention and outcome is one of the central tensions in the novel." For a moment, she thought she might have found common ground with him. But then Tyler smirked and added, "I guess some people just aren't cut out to be heroes, no matter how hard they try." The comment hung in the air like a threat, and Sarah realized this wasn't about literature at all. This was Tyler establishing dominance, letting her know that he saw her as weak and unworthy of respect. After class, as students filed out, Tyler lingered near her desk. "Interesting discussion today, Ms. Martinez. I have a feeling this semester is going to be very educational for both of us." Once he was gone, Sarah sank into her chair and tried to process what had just happened. In her years of teaching, she'd encountered defiant students before, but Tyler Morrison was different. There was a calculated intelligence behind his challenges that made him genuinely dangerous. That evening, as Sarah was leaving the faculty meeting, she noticed several students still hanging around the school parking lot. Ashley Connors was among them, leaning against a car and talking animatedly to a group of underclassmen. Sarah didn't think much of it until she got home and decided to check the school's social media pages to get a better sense of the community. What she found made her blood run cold. Someone had created a fake Facebook account using her name and photo, and had posted several concerning messages. The post suggested she had been fired from her previous job for inappropriate behavior with students, and included fabricated quotes about her unconventional teaching methods. Even worse, the account had been tagged in dozens of comments from anonymous profiles, all seeming to corroborate the false information. The posts had been shared multiple times and already had hundreds of views. Sarah's hands shook as she scrolled through the lies being spread about her character and professionalism. She'd been at Westfield High for exactly 1 day, and her reputation was already under attack. She reached for her phone to call Principal Sullivan, then stopped. What could she prove? The accounts were fake. The posts could have been created by anyone, and Tyler Morrison's name appeared nowhere in the digital trail. As she sat in her empty apartment, staring at the screen full of lies about her life and career, Sarah felt a familiar feeling building in her chest. It was the same controlled fury she felt in the gym when facing a particularly challenging opponent, the kind that sharpened her focus and prepared her for battle. These kids had no idea who they were messing with. Sarah barely slept that first night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those fabricated posts spreading across social media like wildfire. By 5 a.m., she gave up on rest entirely and headed to Iron Mountain Gym for an early morning training session. The gym was a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town, with concrete floors, exposed pipes, and the permanent smell of sweat and determination. Marcus Thompson, the owner, was already there setting up equipment for the day's classes. "You're here early," Marcus observed, noting the tension in Sarah's shoulders as she changed into her training gear. "Couldn't sleep," she replied, wrapping her hands with practiced efficiency. "Mind if I use the heavy bag?" Marcus studied her face and recognized the expression. He'd seen it on dozens of fighters over the years, the look of someone who needed to hit something before they exploded from internal pressure. "Go for it. Work out whatever's eating at you." For the next hour, Sarah unleashed her frustration on the 100-pound heavy bag. Her combinations were precise and powerful: jab, cross, hook, uppercut, each strike carrying the weight of her anger at the injustice of her situation. The rhythmic thudding of leather against sand-filled canvas was meditative, clearing her mind and centering her focus. As she finished her workout, Marcus approached with a towel. "Rough day at the new job?" Sarah accepted the towel gratefully. "Something like that, just some students testing boundaries." "High school kids can be brutal," Marcus agreed. "But from what I've seen of your technique, I'd say you're more than capable of handling whatever they throw at you." If only it were that simple, Sarah thought as she headed home to shower and prepare for day 2. Meanwhile, Tyler Morrison was waking up in his family's sprawling suburban home, immediately reaching for his phone to check the overnight activity on Ashley's fake social media campaign. What he saw exceeded his expectations. The fabricated posts about Sarah had been shared over 200 times, and the comment threads were filled with outraged parents demanding answers from the school district. Several anonymous accounts, all created by Ashley the night before, were keeping the controversy alive with additional revelations about the new teacher's supposed misconduct. Tyler's father, Robert Morrison, was a successful real estate developer who served on the Westfield School Board. He prided himself on being well informed about district affairs. So when his phone started buzzing with calls from concerned parents, he was caught completely off guard. "Tyler." Robert called from downstairs. "Get down here, now." Tyler found his father in the kitchen, still in his bathrobe, surrounded by printouts of the social media posts. Robert's face was red with anger, and Tyler had to fight to keep the smile off his face. "What do you know about this new English teacher?" Robert demanded, waving the papers. "I've got half the PTA calling me about some scandal, and I've never even heard the woman's name before." Tyler adopted his most innocent expression. "Miss Martinez? She just started yesterday. Seems kind of young and inexperienced, but I don't know anything about a scandal." "Well, somebody does," Robert muttered, reaching for his phone. "I need to call Principal Sullivan and get to the bottom of this before it spirals out of control." Back at school, Sarah arrived to find Principal Sullivan waiting in her classroom with a grim expression. The older woman was holding a manila folder thick with printed social media screenshots. "We need to talk," Sullivan said without preamble. "Close the door." Sarah's heart sank as she recognized the familiar fabricated posts among the papers. "I know how this looks, but I can explain." "You don't need to explain anything," Sullivan interrupted. "I've been doing this job for 30 years, and I know a coordinated attack when I see one. The question is, do you have any idea who might be behind this?" Sarah considered mentioning Tyler Morrison, but realized she had no concrete evidence linking him to the fake accounts. "I have suspicions, but nothing I can prove." Sullivan nodded grimly. "I've already contacted our IT department and the district's legal counsel. Creating fake social media accounts to defame a school employee is a serious matter. We will find out who's responsible." "What about the parents?" "I imagine some of them are pretty upset." "I've been fielding calls since 6 this morning," Sullivan admitted. "But I know you passed all your background checks, and your references from Phoenix were glowing. I'm not about to let some internet trolls destroy a good teacher's career." The support was comforting, but Sarah could see the stress lines around Sullivan's eyes. This situation was creating problems for everyone. Exactly as Tyler had intended. First period went smoothly enough, but Sarah could feel the difference in the atmosphere. Some students stared at her with curiosity, others with barely concealed suspicion. Word traveled fast in high school, and clearly the social media campaign was having its intended effect. During her prep period, Sarah decided to take a walk around the school to clear her head. As she passed the gymnasium, she heard the unmistakable sounds of a physical confrontation, shouting, the squeak of sneakers on polished floors, and the dull thud of someone hitting the ground. She pushed through the double doors to find Jake Hendrick standing over a smaller freshman boy, Derek Kim, who was clutching his stomach and trying not to cry. A handful of other students watched from the bleachers, but none moved to help. "What's going on here?" Sarah demanded, striding onto the court. Jake turned with surprise, clearly not expecting a teacher to interrupt his fun. "Just having a friendly conversation with Derek here about respecting his upperclassmen." Derek looked up at Sarah with desperate eyes. "He said I was spreading lies about you, Ms. Martinez, but I wasn't. I told my friends you were a good teacher, and he got mad." Sarah felt a surge of protective anger. This boy was being bullied for defending her reputation, for telling the truth while others spread lies. "Jake, go to the principal's office immediately," she ordered. Jake's expression hardened. "You can't tell me what to do. You're not even a real teacher. Everyone knows you're going to be gone by the end of the week." "I said go to the principal's office, now." For a moment, Jake looked like he might refuse outright. Then something in Sarah's voice, a tone of absolute authority that brooked no argument, made him reconsider. He'd heard that tone before from coaches and drill sergeants, people who weren't used to being disobeyed. "Fine," he muttered, but as he walked past Sarah, he leaned close enough to whisper, "This isn't over." Sarah helped Derek to his feet and walked him to the nurse's office, making sure he wasn't seriously injured. As they walked, the freshman looked up at her with admiration. "Thank you for standing up to Jake, Ms. Martinez. Nobody ever does that. Everyone deserves to feel safe at school, Derek. That includes you." The incident in the gymnasium was reported to Principal Sullivan, who immediately suspended Jake for 3 days. But Sarah knew this victory would only escalate the conflict. With Tyler's group. Fourth period proved her right. Tyler walked into her classroom with a different energy than before, coiled and dangerous, like a snake preparing to strike. He'd heard about Jake's suspension, and Sarah could see the calculation in his eyes as he took his seat. "I hear you had quite an eventful morning, Ms. Martinez," Tyler said as class began. "Jake can be a little enthusiastic sometimes, but he was just trying to help that freshman understand how things work around here. Mr. Morrison, we're here to discuss literature, not hallway politics. But aren't they the same thing?" Tyler replied smoothly. "I mean, look at To Kill a Mockingbird. It's all about people who don't belong in a community trying to change things, and the consequences that follow. Sarah realized he was making a direct threat, using literary analysis as a weapon once. Again, the other students sensed the tension, but couldn't quite understand the subtext of the conversation. "That's an interesting interpretation," Sarah replied carefully. "Though I'd argue the novel is more about the courage to do what's right, even when facing opposition." Tyler's smile was cold. "Sometimes courage and stupidity look very similar, don't they? Especially when someone's fighting a battle they can't possibly win." The bell rang, ending the verbal sparring match, but as students filed out, Tyler paused at Sarah's desk one final time. "You know, Ms. Martinez, Jake's suspension is really unfortunate. Some people might see that as an overreaction from someone who doesn't understand our school culture. I'd hate for things to get even more complicated for you." After he left, Sarah sat alone in her classroom, understanding that the gloves were officially off. Tyler Morrison had just declared war, and she was beginning to realize that her usual teaching strategies weren't going to be enough to survive what was coming. That evening, as Sarah prepared for another training session at Iron Mountain Gym, she made a decision. She'd spent her entire teaching career keeping her two worlds separate, but Tyler and his crew were about to learn that their new target wasn't the helpless victim they'd assumed her to be. Sometimes, she reflected as she laced up her training shoes, the only way to deal with a bully was to show them exactly who they were messing with. The rumors reached a fever pitch by Thursday morning. Ashley Connors had spent the previous evening creating an elaborate network of fake testimonials from supposed former students in Phoenix, each one more damaging than the last. The posts claimed Sarah had been inappropriate with male students, had shown up to work intoxicated, and had even stolen money from the school's fundraising account. By the time Sarah arrived at school, she found Principal Sullivan's office packed with angry parents demanding answers. Through the glass walls, she could see Sullivan gesturing emphatically while trying to maintain order among the crowd of concerned mothers and fathers. "Ms. Martinez," called out Carol Brennan, the PTA president, as Sarah tried to slip past unnoticed. "We need to talk to you about these serious allegations." Sarah turned to face the group, her stomach churning as she recognized the mixture of suspicion and hostility in their expressions. These were parents who genuinely believed they were protecting their children from a dangerous teacher. "I understand your concerns," Sarah said calmly, "but I can assure you that every single allegation is completely fabricated. I've never even met the people making these claims." "That's exactly what someone would say if they were guilty," muttered Frank Morrison, Tyler's uncle, who had driven over from the mayor's office as soon as he heard about the controversy. Before Sarah could respond, Principal Sullivan emerged from her office, her face flushed with frustration. "I've called this meeting to address the situation directly. Please, everyone, follow me to the conference room." The next hour was one of the most humiliating experiences of Sarah's life. She sat at the head of a long table while parents fired accusations at her, demanding to know why she'd been hired despite her obvious problems. Sullivan repeatedly explained that the social media posts were fabricated, that Sarah had passed all background checks, and that the district was investigating the source of the false information, but facts seemed irrelevant in the face of mob mentality. The parents had already decided Sarah was guilty, and they wanted her gone. "I don't care if these posts are fake," declared Jennifer Walsh, mother of a sophomore. "Where there's smoke, there's fire. I don't want this woman anywhere near my daughter." "The district has a responsibility to err on the side of caution," added Robert Morrison, Tyler's father, who had arrived late but quickly took control of the discussion. "Perhaps Ms. Martinez should be placed on administrative leave until this matter is fully resolved." Sarah felt her composure cracking. She'd dedicated her life to education, had moved across the country for this opportunity, and now it was being destroyed by lies created by teenagers who saw her as entertainment. "I won't be placed on leave for crimes I didn't commit," she said. her voice carrying a steel that made several parents shift uncomfortably in their seats. "I'm here to teach, and that's exactly what I'm going to do." The meeting ended with no resolution, but Sarah could see the writing on the wall. Without concrete proof of who was behind the fake accounts, the district would eventually cave to parental pressure. Her career at Westfield High was hanging by a thread. After the parents left, Sullivan pulled Sarah aside. "I'm trying to buy you time, but I need you to understand how serious this is. The school board is meeting tomorrow night, and Morrison is calling for an emergency vote on your employment status. What about the IT investigation? They're working on it, but tracing anonymous social media accounts takes time. We might not have answers by tomorrow." Sarah nodded grimly. She'd been hoping the truth would emerge through official channels, but Tyler's group had been smarter than she'd given them credit for. They'd created a digital paper trail that would take weeks to unravel, and they clearly didn't intend to wait that long. The rest of the day passed in a blur of whispered conversations and suspicious glances. Students who had been warming up to. Sarah now watched her with uncertainty, poisoned by the rumors their parents had shared at breakfast. The few who still believed in her innocence seemed afraid to show their support publicly. During lunch, Sarah retreated to her classroom to avoid the faculty lounge, where she knew her colleagues would be discussing the situation. She was grading papers when she heard a soft knock on the door. Derek Kim, the freshman Jake had been bullying, stood in the doorway looking nervous but determined. "Ms. Martinez, can I talk to you?" "Of course, Derek. Come in." The boy closed the door behind him and approached her desk. "I heard about what people are saying about you. I know it's not true." Sarah felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Derek. That means a lot." "I want to help," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I know Jake and Tyler and Ashley are behind this. I've seen them planning stuff before." "What do you mean?" Derek glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. "They did the same thing to Mr. Peterson last year. I saw Ashley creating fake accounts on her phone during study hall. She was bragging about how easy it was to fool adults." Sarah's pulse quickened. This was the first concrete evidence linking Tyler's group to the harassment campaign. "Derek, would you be willing to tell Principal Sullivan what you just told me?" The boy's face paled. I don't know. If they find out I snitched, they'll make my life hell. Jake already beat me up once for defending you." Sarah understood his fear. High school social dynamics were brutal, and students who crossed the popular bullies often became permanent targets. But she also knew this might be her only chance to expose the truth. "I won't pressure you," she said gently. "But think about it. How many other students are they going to hurt if someone doesn't stop them?" Derek nodded slowly and left, promising to consider her words. That evening, Sarah arrived at Iron Mountain Gym carrying more tension than she'd felt in years. Marcus took one look at her face and immediately cleared the main training area. "You look like you're ready to murder someone," he observed. "Close enough," Sarah replied, pulling on her gloves with sharp, aggressive movements. "Want to talk about it?" Sarah launched into the whole story: the fake social media accounts, the parent meeting, the threat to her job, the systematic campaign to destroy her reputation. Marcus listened without interruption, occasionally nodding as pieces of the puzzle fell into place. "So these kids think they can ruin your life because you're an easy target," he summarized when she finished. "That's about the size of it." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then walked over to the equipment rack and pulled out a pair of focus mitts. "Put these on," he said, handing her the padded targets. "I thought I was going to hit the bag tonight." "Change of plans, Tommy." From across the gym, a lean man in his 30s looked up from the weight bench. Tommy Reeves was a former professional MMA fighter who now worked as one of Marcus's trainers. He had the kind of quiet confidence that came from years of testing himself against the best fighters in the world. "Yeah, boss?" Ms. Martinez here is dealing with some bullies. I think she needs a reminder of what she's capable of." Tommy's eyes lit up with understanding. He'd worked with plenty of fighters who'd lost confidence after facing adversity outside the ring. Sometimes the best cure was a controlled demonstration of their own power. For the next hour, Sarah worked through increasingly complex combinations with Tommy, her strikes landing with precision and devastating force on the focus mitts. Each punch carried the weight of her anger and frustration, but also her growing determination to fight back. "Beautiful work," Tommy said as they finished. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." Sarah peeled off her gloves, feeling more centered than she had in days. The physical exertion had cleared her mind and reminded her of a fundamental truth she'd forgotten during the chaos of the past week. She wasn't a victim. She was a fighter. "Marcus," she said, turning to the gym owner, "I need to ask you a favor. Tomorrow night, there's going to be a school board meeting where they're voting on my employment. I think some of the parents and board members might benefit from meeting the real Sarah Martinez." Marcus grinned. "Are you thinking of making an entrance?" "Something like that, but I'm going to need backup." "Consider it done." "Tommy, clear your schedule for tomorrow night. We're going to a school board meeting." As Sarah drove home through the dark streets of Westfield, she felt a familiar calm settling over her. It was the same feeling she got in the moments before. A fight when all the training and preparation crystallized into pure focus and determination. Tyler Morrison and his crew had made a critical error. They'd assumed she was weak because she was kind, vulnerable because she was new, and helpless because she was alone. Tomorrow night, they were going to learn just how wrong they'd been. Friday morning brought an unexpected development. Derek Kim appeared at Sarah's classroom door before the first period, his face pale but resolute. In his trembling hands, he held a manila envelope thick with printed screenshots. "I couldn't sleep last night," he said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "I kept thinking about what you said, about how many other students there going to hurt." Sarah's heart raced as Derek opened the envelope and spread the contents across her desk. The printouts showed a detailed conversation thread between Ashley, Tyler, and Jake, discussing their fabricated social media campaign in explicit detail. "How did you get these?" Sarah asked, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. Ashley's. "Been dating my older brother Marcus since last year," Derek explained. "She uses our family computer sometimes when she's at our house. She forgot to log out of her messaging app last night." The evidence was devastating. The messages showed Ashley bragging about creating fake testimonials, Tyler providing specific details about what lies would be most damaging, and Jake suggesting ways to spread the rumors among parent groups. Most damning of all was a message from Tyler reading, "By Monday, Martinez will be gone and we can get back to having fun with the substitute teachers." "Derek, this is incredible." "This proves everything." The freshman nodded nervously. "I know. But Ms. Martinez, if they find out I took these screenshots, they'll destroy me. Tyler's already been asking around about who might have snitched after Jake got suspended." Sarah studied the boy's face, seeing her own younger self in his determination to do what was right despite the personal cost. "I understand you're scared. But Derek, you might be the only person who can stop them from doing this to other teachers." "I know," he whispered. "That's why I'm here." They spent the next 20 minutes going through the evidence methodically. The messages not only proved the current campaign against Sarah, but also referenced their successful effort against Mr. Peterson the previous year. There were even discussions about targeting other teachers they deemed weak or annoying. "I'll take these directly to Principal Sullivan," Sarah said, carefully organizing the printouts. "Wait," Derek said, pulling out his phone. "I got something else last night." Ashley posted a video on her private Snapchat story. She was drunk and talking about the whole plan. He showed Sarah a recording he'd made of the Snapchat video. In it, Ashley was clearly intoxicated, laughing as she described how easy it was to destroy some random teacher's life, and how her fake accounts had fooled all the stupid parents. "This is everything we need," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "Derek, you just saved my career." But as the first period began, Sarah noticed Derek wasn't in his usual seat in her sophomore English class. When she asked his classmate where he was, the girl shrugged and said she'd heard he was sick. During her lunch break, Sarah hurried to Principal Sullivan's office with the evidence. Sullivan's eyes widened as she reviewed the screenshots and watched the Snapchat video. "This is exactly what we needed," Sullivan said grimly. "I'm calling all 3 students to the office immediately, along with their parents." But when Sullivan tried to reach Derek to thank him and get his official statement, she discovered he hadn't come to school that day. His mother explained that Derek had woken up that morning with a black eye and split lip, claiming he'd fallen down the stairs. She was keeping him home as a precaution. Sarah felt sick. Somehow, Tyler's group had discovered Derek's involvement and had already retaliated. The boy had risked everything to help her, and now he was paying the price. "We proceed without Derek's testimony," Sullivan decided. "The digital evidence speaks for itself." By 2 p.m., Tyler Morrison, Ashley Connors, and Jake Hendricks sat in the principal's office with their parents, facing the mountain of evidence Derek had provided. Sullivan had called in the district's legal counsel and the school resource officer to handle what was clearly a case of cyberbullying and defamation. Tyler's father, Robert, tried to control the situation, threatening lawsuits and demanding proof that the accounts were actually created by his son. But the technical evidence was overwhelming: IP addresses, device fingerprints, and timestamp correlations that tied the fake accounts directly to the students' phones and computers. Ashley broke first, dissolving into tears as she confessed to creating the fake profiles. Her parents were horrified, threatening to take away her phone and ground her until graduation. Jake's uncle, the mayor, arrived looking furious and immediately began distancing himself from his nephew's actions. But Tyler remained defiant, even as his father's political career crumbled around him. Robert Morrison's position on the school board became untenable the moment his son's cyberbullying campaign was exposed. "This is blown way out of proportion," Tyler insisted. "It was just a prank that got out of hand." "A prank?" Sullivan's voice was ice cold. "You created elaborate fake testimonials accusing a teacher of criminal behavior. You organized a harassment campaign that could have destroyed an innocent woman's career and reputation. That's not a prank, Mr. Morrison. That's malicious defamation." The 3 students were immediately suspended pending a formal disciplinary hearing. Criminal charges for cyberbullying and harassment were being considered by the district attorney's office. Most importantly for Sarah, a letter of apology and retraction would be sent to every parent in the district, along with an explanation of how they had been deceived. But Tyler wasn't finished. As he was escorted from the building by his humiliated father, he spotted Sarah in the hallway and broke away from the group. "This isn't over," he hissed, getting close enough that only she could hear. "You think you won, but I know where you live. I know your routine. You better watch your back." The threat was delivered quietly enough that the adults couldn't hear it, but Sarah caught every word. She realized that Tyler's public defeat had only made him more dangerous. Suspended from school and facing serious consequences, he had nothing left to lose. That evening, the school board meeting proceeded as scheduled, but with a dramatically different tone. Instead of debating Sarah's employment, the board was now dealing with a crisis of public confidence. Robert Morrison had resigned his position rather than face a vote of no confidence, and parents who had demanded Sarah's removal the day before were now apologizing for their rush to judgment. Sarah addressed the packed auditorium, thanking the community for their support and expressing her commitment to Westfield High School. She spoke about the importance of due process and the dangers of trial by social media. Her composure and professionalism impressed even the parents who had been most vocal in their criticism. But as she walked to her car after the meeting, Sarah noticed Tyler Morrison leaning against a truck in the far corner of the parking lot. He was wearing dark clothing and a baseball cap pulled low over his face, but she recognized his posture immediately. He was watching her, waiting. Sarah's training kicked in automatically. She scanned the parking lot for exits, noting the positions of other people and potential witnesses. Most of the crowd had already left, and the remaining cars were scattered across the large lot. Tyler pushed off from the truck and began walking toward her, his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the rage in his movements, the coiled tension of someone who had spent the day nursing his humiliation and planning revenge. "Ms. Martinez," he called out, his voice carrying across the empty asphalt. "I think we need to finish our conversation." Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him fully. For weeks, she'd been the victim in this situation, the target of his harassment, the object of his manipulation. But as Tyler approached with obvious malicious intent, something fundamental shifted in her mind. She was done being afraid. Done being defensive. Done pretending to be helpless. "What conversation?" "Is that Tyler?" she replied, her voice carrying a new quality that made him slow his approach. He was close enough now that she could see the hatred in his eyes, the entitled fury of someone who wasn't used to facing consequences for his actions. His right hand was clenched around something in his jacket pocket. "The one where I explain what happens to teachers who don't know their place," he said, pulling his hand from his pocket to reveal a small knife with a 4-inch blade. That's when Tyler Morrison made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd assumed that because Sarah was a teacher, she was weak. Because she was kind, she was vulnerable. Because she'd been the victim of his harassment, she was helpless. He was about to discover just how wrong he'd been. Sarah's eyes locked onto the knife and her body shifted into a fighting stance so subtly that Tyler didn't even notice. Her weight moved to the balls of her feet, her center of gravity dropped, and her hands relaxed into positions that would allow her to defend or attack in an instant. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Sarah Martinez smiled, seemed to slow as Tyler advanced with the knife, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. He'd spent months building his reputation as Westfield High's most feared bully, and now this quiet teacher had destroyed everything he'd worked for. In his teenage mind, violence was the only way to reclaim his power. "You cost me everything," he snarled, raising the blade. "My dad lost his job on the school board because of you. Ashley's parents are sending her to boarding school. Jake might get expelled. All because you couldn't just quit like you were supposed to." Sarah remained perfectly still, her years of training allowing her to assess every detail of the situation. Tyler was holding the knife like someone who'd seen too many movies, high and obvious, telegraphing his intentions. His stance was all wrong, weight distributed poorly, leaving him vulnerable to a dozen different counters. More importantly, he was emotional, angry, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. "Tyler," Sarah said calmly, "put the knife away and walk back to your truck. This doesn't have to go any further." Her composure only enraged him more. "Stop acting like you're in control. You're just some weak teacher who got lucky. But luck runs out." He lunged forward with the knife, aiming for her chest in a wild, undisciplined attack that would have been devastating against an untrained victim. But Sarah Martinez wasn't an untrained victim. She moved with fluid precision, stepping to her left while simultaneously grabbing Tyler's wrist with both hands. Using his own momentum against him, she twisted his arm in a direction it wasn't designed to go while stepping through and behind him. The knife clattered to the asphalt as Tyler found himself face down on the ground with Sarah's knee pressed against his spine and his arm locked in a position that sent shooting pain through his shoulder. "What the hell?" Tyler gasped, struggling against the hold. "Stop moving," Sarah commanded, applying just enough pressure to make her point clear. "Every time you struggle, you're making it worse for yourself." Tyler had never experienced anything like this. One moment he'd been the aggressor with a weapon, the next he was completely helpless on the ground. The speed and efficiency of Sarah's response was unlike anything he'd seen outside of action. "Movies, how did you... Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?" Sarah replied matter-of-factly. 8 years of training, black belt, regional champion twice running. You brought a knife to a fight with someone who knows 50 different ways to put you to sleep without breaking a sweat. The realization hit Tyler like a physical blow. All this time, he'd been targeting someone who could have ended his bullying career with her bare hands. The quiet, unassuming teacher he'd seen as easy prey was actually a trained fighter who had been showing remarkable restraint. "You're hurting me," Tyler whimpered, his tough guy persona evaporating as the reality of his situation sank in. "Good," Sarah said coldly. "For weeks, you've been hurting people. Derek Kim, who did nothing but tell the truth. Mr. Peterson, who quit teaching because of your lies. Me, when you tried to destroy my career and reputation. And just now, you pulled a knife on me in a parking lot." She increased the pressure slightly, causing Tyler to cry out. "The only reason you're not unconscious right now is because I choose to show you more mercy than you've ever shown anyone else." From across the parking lot, car doors slammed as Marcus Thompson and Tommy Reeves came running. Sarah had texted them her location when she first spotted Tyler, and they'd been waiting nearby in case she needed backup. "Everything okay over here?" Marcus called out, taking in the scene with professional interest. "Just having a conversation about bullying and consequences," Sarah replied, not releasing her hold on Tyler. Tommy whistled appreciatively as he approached. "Nice arm control. Very clean technique. Thank you." Tyler here thought it would be fun to threaten me with a knife. I was just explaining why that was a poor decision. Marcus pulled out his phone and took several photos of the knife on the ground, then called 911. "We'll need police and an ambulance. Student assaulted a teacher with a deadly weapon." "I don't need an ambulance," Tyler gasped. "Not for you," Tommy said grimly. "For the reality check you just received." Within minutes, the parking lot was filled with flashing lights. Police officers, paramedics, and Principal Sullivan all arrived to find Tyler still pinned beneath Sarah, who had maintained perfect control of the situation throughout. "Ms. Martinez," Officer Janet Rodriguez said as she approached, "you can release him now. We'll take it from here." Sarah smoothly transitioned from the arm lock to a standing position, allowing Tyler to roll over and cradle his aching shoulder. He looked up at her with a mixture of fear and newfound respect, finally understanding that he'd been completely outmatched from the beginning. "That was textbook self-defense," Officer Rodriguez observed after reviewing the knife and taking statements from Marcus and Tommy, who had witnessed the attack. "Clean, proportional, and controlled. Most people would have panicked or overreacted." As Tyler was handcuffed and read his rights, he looked back at Sarah one final time. "Why didn't you tell anyone you could fight?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "Because my job is to teach literature, not to intimidate students. I became a teacher to help young people learn and grow, not to show off my martial arts skills. But you could have stopped all of this from the beginning. I tried to stop it the right way first, through the proper channels with evidence and due process. Violence should always be the last resort. Tyler, the fact that you went straight to a knife tells me everything I need to know about the difference between us." As the police car pulled away with Tyler in the back seat, Principal Sullivan approached Sarah with a look of amazement. "In 30 years of education, I've never seen anything like that. Where did you learn to fight like that?" Sarah smiled, finally feeling free to share the part of herself she'd kept hidden. Iron Mountain Gym. I've been training in mixed martial arts for 8 years. It started as self-defense, but it became a passion. And you never thought to mention this during your interview? Would it have mattered? I'm not here to be a security guard or enforcer. I'm here to teach English literature and help students develop critical thinking skills. Sullivan nodded thoughtfully. Though I have to say, your ability to handle crisis situations might be useful in other ways. Have you ever considered coaching? Over the following weeks, the story of the mild-mannered English teacher who turned out to be a championship-level fighter spread throughout Westfield like wildfire. But rather than creating fear or intimidation, Sarah found that students responded to her with increased respect and curiosity. Derek Kim, whose bruises healed quickly once Tyler was arrested, became one of her most enthusiastic students. He even asked if he could write his semester paper on the themes of courage and justice in literature, using real-world examples of people standing up to bullies. Ashley Connors, facing criminal charges and transferred to a strict boarding school, sent Sarah a handwritten letter of apology. The letter was brief but seemed genuine, acknowledging the harm she'd caused and expressing hope that she could learn from her mistakes. Jake Hendricks was expelled from Westfield High and enrolled in an alternative school across town. His uncle, the mayor, quietly arranged for him to receive counseling for his aggressive behavior. Tyler Morrison faced the most serious consequences. Assault with a deadly weapon, cyberbullying, and harassment charges resulted in juvenile detention and mandatory anger management classes. His father, Robert, lost his business contracts with the school district and eventually moved the family to another state to escape the scandal. 3 months later, Sarah stood in front of her 4th period class, leading a discussion about moral courage in Harper Lee's classic novel. The students were engaged and thoughtful, asking complex questions about the nature of heroism and the responsibility to stand up for what's right. Ms. Martinez asked a student named Emma Rodriguez, "Do you think Atticus Finch would have been a better hero if he'd known how to fight?" Sarah smiled, thinking about all the ways that question could be answered. "That's an interesting thought, Emma. But I think the most important kind of strength isn't physical. It's the courage to do what's right, even when it's difficult or dangerous." She paused, looking around the classroom at the faces of students who had learned to trust her, not because they feared her physical abilities, but because they respected her character and dedication. "Sometimes," she continued, "the strongest thing you can do is show restraint. Violence should always be the last option, used only when someone is trying to hurt you or others you care about." Derek Kim raised his hand. "But when it is necessary, it's important to be prepared?" "Absolutely," Sarah nodded. "Being prepared means having options. The goal is never to hurt anyone, but to protect yourself and others when all other solutions have failed." After class, as students filed out discussing the lesson, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that first day when Tyler Morrison had sized her up as easy prey. She'd learned that sometimes the best way to avoid violence is to be prepared for it, and that true strength comes from knowing when to use your power and when to hold it in reserve. The bullies had tried to crush her with lies and intimidation, never realizing that their quiet target was actually a trained fighter who could have ended their harassment campaign at any time. But by choosing to fight back the right way first, with evidence, truth, and the proper authorities, Sarah had not only saved her own career, but had also taught her students a valuable lesson about justice, courage, and the importance of standing up for what's right. Sometimes, the most devastating way to crush a lie is simply to reveal the truth. 6 months after the parking lot incident, Westfield High School had transformed into a completely different environment. The hallways that once echoed with whispered rumors and cruel laughter now buzzed with genuine academic discussions and collaborative projects. Students who had previously lived in fear of Tyler's crew were finally free to express themselves without worrying about retaliation. Sarah Martinez walked through these same halls with a confidence that came not from her revealed fighting skills, but from the respect she'd earned through her unwavering commitment to doing what was right. Her classroom had become one of the most popular spaces in the school, where students felt safe to explore complex ideas and challenge themselves intellectually. Morning sun streamed through the windows of room 204 as Sarah prepared for another day. Her desk now held additional items that told the story of her journey: a thank you card from Derek Kim's parents, a newspaper clipping about the cyberbullying prevention program she'd helped implement, and a photo from the regional teacher appreciation ceremony where she'd been honored for her courage and dedication. Her first period sophomore class had grown from 22 students to 31, with students requesting transfers specifically to be in her English course. Word had spread that Ms. Martinez didn't just teach literature, she helped students understand how the themes they read about connected to real life. "Good morning, everyone," Sarah said as the bell rang. "Today we're starting our unit on resilience in literature, beginning with Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings." Emma Rodriguez, who had become one of Sarah's most thoughtful students, raised her hand immediately. "Ms. Martinez, is this going to be about overcoming adversity like we discussed with To Kill a Mockingbird?" "Excellent connection, Emma. Yes, but Angelou's work gives us a different perspective on finding strength in the face of injustice." Can anyone think of examples from your own experiences where literature helped you understand a difficult situation? Derek Kim's hand shot up. Over the past months, he'd blossomed from a quiet, fearful freshman into a confident young man who wasn't afraid to speak his mind. "Last year, when I was getting bullied, I felt like I was totally alone. But reading about characters who stood up to bigger, stronger opponents helped me realize that courage doesn't always look like what you see in movies." The class nodded thoughtfully. Many of them had witnessed Rick's transformation, and his willingness to share his experiences had helped create an atmosphere where vulnerability was seen as strength rather than weakness. "That's a profound observation, Derek," Sarah said. "Literature gives us a safe space to explore difficult emotions and situations. It helps us understand that we're not alone in our struggles." As the discussion continued, Sarah noticed something that still amazed her months later. These students weren't just analyzing text, they were making genuine connections between what they read and how they lived their lives. They talked openly about fear, courage, justice, and moral responsibility in ways that went far beyond typical high school discourse. During her lunch break, Sarah made her way to the gym where she'd started an after-school self-defense club. What had begun as a small group of students interested in learning basic safety techniques had grown into a program with over 40 participants, both male and female. The club wasn't about teaching students to fight, but rather about building confidence, discipline, and situational awareness. Sarah worked with Marcus Thompson and Tommy Reeves to create a curriculum that emphasized de-escalation, personal safety, and the responsibility that came with knowing how to defend oneself. "Remember," Sarah told the group as they practiced basic escape techniques, "the goal is never to hurt someone. The goal is to create enough distance to get to safety and call for help." Among the students was Maria Santos, a junior who had been struggling with anxiety since middle school. When she first joined the club, Maria could barely make eye contact with her classmates. Now she was demonstrating proper stance and breathing techniques to newer members. "Ms. Martinez," Maria said after class, "I wanted to thank you again for encouraging me to join this club. I feel like I can handle anything now." "You could always handle anything, Maria. The club just helped you realize that about yourself." These moments reminded Sarah why she'd become a teacher in the first place. Education wasn't just about transmitting information. It was about helping young people discover their own strength and potential. The transformation extended beyond individual students to the entire school culture. Principal Sullivan had implemented new policies based on Sarah's recommendations, including mandatory training for all staff on recognizing and responding to cyberbullying. The district had also adopted a comprehensive social media awareness program that taught students about digital citizenship and the real-world consequences of online actions. The changes you've brought to this school go far beyond what happened in that parking lot, Sullivan told Sarah during their monthly check-in meeting. Your approach to education, connecting literature to life skills, building student confidence, creating safe spaces for difficult conversations, it's exactly what our kids need. Sarah appreciated the recognition, but she knew the real credit belonged to the students who had chosen to embrace growth and change rather than perpetuating cycles of fear and intimidation. The most surprising development had come from an unexpected source. Ashley Connors, who had completed her first semester at boarding school, had written Sarah a second letter that arrived just that morning. This one was different from her initial apology. It showed genuine reflection and growth. Dear Ms. Martinez, the letter began, I know I don't deserve a response to this, but I wanted you to know that the experience at Westfield changed my life. Not just getting caught and facing consequences, but seeing how you handled everything. You could have destroyed us when you had the chance, but instead you focused on justice and helping people heal. I'm learning about restorative justice in my ethics class here, and I finally understand what you were trying to teach us. The letter went on to describe Ashley's volunteer work with younger students who had been victims of cyberbullying and her plans to study communications and digital ethics in college. It ended with a request that Sarah probably wouldn't have expected 6 months earlier. I know this might sound crazy, but would you be willing to let me write my senior project about what happened at Westfield? Not to make excuses for what I did, but to help other students understand how quickly social media can be used to destroy innocent people, and how important it is to verify information before believing or sharing it. Sarah read the letter twice, remembering the cruel, manipulative teenager who had nearly destroyed her career with fabricated social media posts. The growth Ashley described seemed genuine, though Sarah remained cautiously optimistic about lasting change. During her afternoon prep period, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Derek Kim knocked on her classroom door, accompanied by a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and graying hair. Ms. Martinez, Derek said with obvious excitement. I'd like you to meet my mom, Dr. Jennifer Kim. She's a psychologist, and she wanted to thank you personally. Dr. Kim stepped forward with a warm smile. Ms. Martinez, I can't adequately express what you've done for my son. Derek was having nightmares about coming to school, his grades were suffering, and he'd lost all confidence in himself. The change since you arrived has been remarkable. Derek did the hard work himself, Sarah replied. I just provided some support and encouragement. You did much more than that, Dr. Kim continued. You showed him that adults would stand up for what's right, even when it was difficult and dangerous. You demonstrated that strength comes in many forms, and that kindness isn't the same as weakness. These are lessons that will serve him for the rest of his life. As the school day ended, Sarah made her way to Iron Mountain Gym for her regular training session. The gym had become something of a local celebrity spot since the parking lot incident, with news outlets running stories about the teacher who fought back. But Marcus had kept the media attention from disrupting the training environment, and Sarah was grateful to have a place where she could continue developing her skills away from the spotlight. How's the famous teacher doing today? Tommy asked with a grin as Sarah wrapped her hands for sparring practice. Just fine, as long as you promise not to go easy on me because of my newfound reputation. Wouldn't dream of it. Marcus wants to talk to you about something after training, by the way. An hour later, as Sarah cooled down from an intense sparring session, Marcus approached with a proposal that caught her completely off guard. I've been thinking about expanding our youth programs, he said. After seeing what you've accomplished with the kids at school, I'd like to offer you a partnership. We could develop a comprehensive program that combines martial arts training with leadership development and conflict resolution. Sarah was intrigued. What would that look like? Think about it. Kids are learning not just how to defend themselves physically, but how to navigate difficult social situations, stand up to bullying, and make ethical decisions under pressure. You'd bring the educational expertise, and we'd provide the training facilities and martial arts instruction. The idea was appealing, offering a way to reach even more young people with the lessons she'd learned about courage, justice, and personal responsibility. As Sarah drove home through the mountains surrounding Westfield, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. 6 months ago, she'd been a struggling substitute teacher, taking a chance on a permanent position in a small mountain town. She'd hoped to find stability and the opportunity to make a difference in students' lives. What she'd found instead was a test of everything she believed about justice, courage, and the power of truth to overcome lies. She discovered that her greatest strength wasn't her ability to fight, but her refusal to be intimidated or driven away from doing what she knew was right. The bullies who had tried to crush her with lies had ultimately revealed something far more powerful, that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when they stood up for their principles and refused to be silenced by fear. Tyler Morrison, now completing his court-ordered community service at a youth center in Denver, had learned that actions have consequences and that real strength comes from building others up rather than tearing them down. Jake Hendricks was excelling at his new school, having discovered a talent for peer mediation and conflict resolution. Ashley Connors was channeling her communication skills toward positive ends, working to prevent the kind of harm she'd once caused. And Sarah Martinez, the quiet English teacher who had been underestimated by those who mistook kindness for weakness, had become exactly what she'd always intended to be, an educator who helped young people understand that they had the power to choose courage over fear, truth over lies, and justice over revenge. Sometimes the most crushing blow to a lie isn't violence or retaliation. Sometimes it's simply the unwavering determination to stand for truth, no matter what the cost. In room 204 at Westfield High School, that lesson was being taught every single day. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.